My name is Emma Collins. And for most of my life, I believed that a child's love for their mother should be a stable thing. Unshakable. Natural. Given. But what I didn't understand was that some mothers build their love like a house of cards, beautiful at first, but trembling with every breath you take. And mine, well, she built hers on control. When my father died, I told myself the grief I was feeling was normal. I told myself the ache in my chest was just the natural breaking of a daughter who lost her protector. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the grief I felt wasn't only for my dad, it was for the parts of him that took truth with them. Because sometimes the dead leave behind more than memories. They leave secrets. And those secrets reveal people in ways you never expected. Dad passed on a cold January morning. I remember the frost on the window when I got the phone call, the way the sun hit the ice and made it sparkle like something beautiful even though the world was falling apart. He'd been sick, but he didn't tell me how bad it had gotten. He thought he was protecting me. That was always his way. He used to say, "Emma, you feel things too deeply. I need to protect that." I never questioned it. I thought that was love. But later, I would learn what protection really meant. The day after the funeral, the family gathered at my mother's house. Not to comfort one another. Not to share stories. But to look at what needed sorting. My mother was the kind of woman who believed emotion was a luxury. A weakness. Something to tuck away like a seasonal decoration. So when I sat on her couch with swollen eyes and a blanket around my shoulders, she didn't hug me. She didn't sit next to me. She simply picked up a stack of envelopes from the coffee table and said briskly, "Let's get through this. No use letting it drag." I remember looking at her hands, steady, firm, unemotional, peeling through the mail like she was going through grocery receipts. "Mom," I whispered, my throat aching, "can we wait a little?" "For what?" she said flatly. "Time isn't going to change anything." But I needed time. I needed softness. I needed the kind of mother who could sit with her daughter's heartbreak and say, "I'm here." Instead, she held up a manila envelope and said, "This is nothing. Just more paperwork." She tossed it aside. It landed near my feet. I stared at it for a long moment. "Mom, what was that?" She waved her hand. "Something your father insisted on filing." "It's just paper. Just paper." I reached down and picked it up. The envelope felt heavy, like it held a piece of the world inside it. My mother froze, eyes narrowed, lips tightening the way they always did when she felt control slipping. "Emma," she said, voice stiff, "put that down. There's no need to complicate things." Something inside me twisted. Complicate things. I opened the envelope anyway. And that was the moment everything changed. Because inside wasn't junk. Inside wasn't nothing. Inside wasn't just paper. It was the deed. To the house. To the land. To everything my father owned. And the name written on the deed wasn't my mother's. It wasn't my brother's. It wasn't even shared. It was mine. Owner, Emma Collins. My vision blurred. The room tilted. I read the line 10 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. But there it was in my father's handwriting, shakier than usual, but unmistakably his. The heat in my chest spread to my throat, then to my eyes. "Mom," I whispered, "why is my name on this?" She stood quietly for a long moment before saying softly, "Your father didn't know what he was doing." "Yes he did," I whispered. "He signed this." "He was confused," she insisted. "No," I said more firmly, "he wasn't." She stepped closer, her eyes sharp. "Emma, listen to me. This is not going to stand. You can't handle something like this. You're emotional. You're soft. Put it down." And there it was again, the word she always used as an insult. Soft. But Dad never saw my softness as a flaw. He saw it as something worth protecting. I looked back at the deed, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. My heart was beating in my ears, loud enough to drown out everything else. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked quietly. "Because he knew you'd make a mess of this," she snapped. "You're not equipped for ownership. For responsibility. You barely manage your own life." Her words pierced, sharp and familiar, because they were. The same words she used when I cried too loudly as a child, or when I failed a math test, or when I couldn't stop shaking after my first heartbreak. "You're weak, Emma," she'd always say. "You feel too much. You'll never survive like that. But Dad had looked at the same softness and said, you feel because you care. And caring is rare. Tears filled my eyes. He trusted me. Her expression hardened. He made a mistake. I shook my head. No, you're afraid. The room fell silent. My mother stood completely still. The only movement was in her eyes, which flickered with something sharp, anger. Hurt. Fear. It was hard to tell. She'd buried her emotions so deeply she probably didn't even recognize them anymore. You're afraid he trusted me more than you, I whispered. Her breath stuttered. She didn't deny it. Not even once. She walked past me, grabbed the envelope, and tried to rip it out of my hands. Give it to me. No. I clutched it to my chest. Emma. She grabbed my wrist. You don't understand the consequences of this. Then explain them, I said, my voice trembling. Explain why Dad made me the owner. Because you manipulate him with your tears, she hissed. I flinched. Not because of the words, but because of the venom in them. My tears? I repeated softly. Mom. I barely let him see me cry. That's the manipulation, she snapped. Acting fragile. Acting like you need saving. He felt guilty. He felt responsible for you. I shook my head slowly. No. He felt love. She scoffed. Love is nothing without logic. Her voice was so cold it made my bones ache. I took a few steps back, holding the deed carefully. Dad wanted me to have this. He chose me. You are not capable of handling property, she said sharply. You can't even manage your emotions. That's because mine actually exist, I whispered. She froze. Her eyes went wide, stunned, not because I was wrong, but because she wasn't used to me pushing back. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I didn't bend. I held the deed against my chest like it was a shield. My mother whispered, voice trembling with a rage she could barely contain, you have no idea what you're doing. That paper, it's just paper, I said softly, echoing her own words. But it's also everything. She stared at me with eyes full of both fury and fear. And in that moment, I understood something profound. She wasn't afraid of losing the house. She wasn't afraid of losing control of the estate. She was afraid of losing control of me. And that was the beginning of the softest, most unexpected revenge I never intended, a revenge born not from anger, but from truth finally having a voice. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear. Not because of shock. But because the truth in my hands felt heavier than anything I'd ever been given. I lay in bed with the deed on my nightstand, the envelope open, my father's handwriting visible every time I turned my head toward the lamp. That handwriting, the loops, the pressure, even the tiny tremble that had started to appear during his last few months, it felt like he was speaking to me through ink. You were never weak, sweetheart. You were honest. He'd said that once, when I cried after a breakup and apologized for being too emotional. My mother had rolled her eyes in the background. But he'd only pulled me closer. And now here I was, years later, staring at the last thing he ever signed for me. But sleep wasn't an option. Not with the way my mother looked at me earlier, like she saw her power slipping through her fingers. The next morning, I walked into her kitchen and found her hunched over the table, reading through files spread out like a battlefield. She didn't look up. You're early, she said flatly. I live here, I said quietly. You won't, she muttered under her breath. I froze. What did you say? Nothing. She snapped a folder shut. Did you read it? The deed? I asked. Yes. Her jaw tensed. And you still think it's legitimate? It has Dad's signature, I said. His dates. His notary stamp. Why wouldn't it be? She stood abruptly. Because he wasn't in his right state of mind. I inhaled slowly. Mom, he was clear. He knew what he was doing. He didn't, she snapped, her voice rising in a sharp, unfamiliar crack. He made irrational decisions that hurt this family. This family, I repeated softly. Or you. Her eyes flickered. I didn't yell. I didn't throw accusations. I didn't shake or crumble or back down. I felt strangely calm, as if the truth inside me steadied the places that always used to shake. Mom, I said gently, what are you so afraid of? Don't talk to me like I'm unstable, she hissed. I didn't say unstable. You implied it. No, I said softly. I asked why this bothers you so much. She stared at me. Really stared. Like she'd never looked directly at me before. Then she sat down, folding her hands tightly together. When you were born, she said quietly, I promised myself you would never struggle the way I had to. I blinked, thrown off. Struggle how? With money. With security. With self-discipline. Her voice tightened. I grew up with nothing. We lived in fear every month that we would lose the house. I swore that would never happen to my children. I sat down slowly. Mom, that makes sense. But what does it have to do with me having the deed? She didn't look at me. Your father giving it to you put everything at risk. What risk? I asked gently. You, she said, voice sharp, are emotional. I exhaled. The word again. Always that word. You make decisions from your heart, not your head, she continued. You trust people too easily. You get attached. You forgive people who don't deserve it. You cry when you should walk away. You panic when you should plan. I closed my eyes. I'd heard it all before. You are soft, she whispered. As if softness is the enemy. When I opened my eyes, my voice came out shaky but clear. Dad never thought softness made me weak. Her face twisted. Your father ruined you with that thinking. He kept telling you your heart was enough. It's not. The world doesn't reward softness. Maybe not, I whispered. But he did. She flinched. And something inside me finally clicked into place. All my life I thought my mother didn't like my softness because she didn't understand it. But that wasn't it at all. She feared it. Because softness is unpredictable. Softness is vulnerable. Softness is unmanageable. And control was her whole language. She leaned forward. Emma, you need to sign it over. You need to let me handle this. Your name on that paper means I have no authority. Do you understand what that does? It ties my hands. It ties everything. No, I said quietly. It frees mine. Her eyes widened in horror. You don't mean that. I do. Her voice trembled for the first time. I raised you better than this. No, I whispered. You raised me to be afraid of you. Her face broke, just slightly, like a crack forming in porcelain. I stood up slowly. I'm not signing anything over. Dad gave me the deed for a reason. And I'm going to honor that. She stood too, shaking. Emma, if you do this, you're choosing him over me. He's gone, I whispered. I'm choosing myself. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Silence fell, thick, suffocating, painful. Then she whispered, I can't believe you would betray me like this. I took a step back. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time, I saw her clearly, not as a mother, not as a villain, but as a woman terrified of being powerless. I'm not betraying you, I said softly. I'm growing. Her eyes filled with something she refused to let fall, tears she'd trained herself for decades not to show. She turned away, clenching the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles whitened. You'll regret this, she whispered. No, I said gently. You will. She inhaled sharply. Not because my words were cruel. But because they were true. And truth, when spoken softly, can hit harder than any scream ever could. I walked out of the room, the deed clutched to my chest. Behind me, I heard her whisper, barely audible but drenched in fear, it's just paper, but even she didn't believe that anymore. Because she knew. She knew exactly what I had learned. The paper wasn't paper. It was freedom. It was trust. It was proof that love could look different than control. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to hold it. The next morning felt different. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from the echo that follows a storm. My mother wasn't in the kitchen. She wasn't in the living room. She wasn't moving around upstairs. It was like she was hiding from the truth, hoping silence could trap it or smother it. But the truth has its own heartbeat. It doesn't stop because someone's afraid of it. I went about my day in a strange calm. I made tea. I folded laundry. I answered emails. And all the while, the deeds sat tucked securely in my bag like a small, warm flame. Around noon, I heard the front door open. My mother walked in with my older brother, Michael, someone who had always walked the fine line between loyalty and indifference. He hugged me briefly, but his eyes kept flicking to my mother, like she'd told him something urgent on the way over. Emma, he said, pulling back, Mom called. She said you two had a disagreement. I inhaled slowly. Is that what she told you? He sighed. Look, I know Dad's death has us all emotional. But Mom said something about you finding the deed? And thinking it belongs to you? Not thinking, I said calmly. Reading. Mom glanced at Michael, as if she'd warned him I'd become irrational again. I walked to my bag, pulled out the deed, and placed it gently on the kitchen table. The sunlight caught the embossed seal, making the gold shimmer. Michael froze. Dad signed this? Yes. He swallowed hard. And, your name is the only one here? Yes. He stared for a long moment, processing, face tightening with every second. My mother walked around him and reached for the paper like she was trying to rescue a drowning child. Emma, she snapped sharply, we cannot let this stand. Your father wasn't thinking clearly when he did this. Michael turned to her. Mom, that's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, she insisted. It's reality. He was confused. Weak. He made emotional decisions. My voice trembled. He wasn't confused when he talked to me. She snapped, stop acting like you had some special relationship with him. Michael raised a hand. Mom, no, she barked. She needs to hear this. Emma always acted like she understood him better. Like she knew what he needed. She clung to him emotionally and made him feel guilty for being sick. The words hit me like a slap. My breath caught. I never made him feel guilty. Michael looked at our mother. Mom, that's not fair. It is fair, she cried, her voice cracking for the first time in years. It's fair because I was the one holding everything together. I was the one making choices. And he kept slipping away emotionally. He was closer to her than he was to me. Her voice broke on the last words. The room went silent. She stared at the table, breathing hard, and suddenly I saw everything clearly, not the cold, strong woman she pretended to be, but someone fragile beneath layers of control and fear. She wasn't angry at me for having the deed. She was heartbroken Dad had trusted me in ways he didn't trust her. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. Mom. Dad loved you. You know that. She shook her head. He loved her more. I inhaled sharply. Mom, he didn't love me more. He relied on me more. There's a difference. Why? She whispered. Why you? Her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was wounded. It was lost. I stepped closer, my voice soft. Because I was there. Not because I was better. Not because he loved me more. Because I showed up. Her eyes watered, and she blinked fast to hide it. I didn't know how, she said quietly, almost confessing. When he got sick, I didn't know how to be what he needed. He leaned on you because you were gentle. And that scared me. Gentle. Soft. All the things she spent my entire life trying to carve out of me. Mom, I whispered, nobody teaches us how to love perfectly. Dad didn't expect that from you. But he expected it from you, she said, voice trembling. He didn't, I said gently. I gave it freely. Silent tears slipped down her cheeks. It startled me. I'd spent my whole life believing my mother didn't cry. Seeing one tear felt like watching a mountain crack. She sat down in a chair, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Emma, if the house is yours, what happens to me? And there it was. The fear. The root of everything. She wasn't afraid of me having control. She was afraid of losing her place. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down slowly. Mom, I said softly, you're not losing the house. She looked up sharply. But the deed, yes, I said. It's in my name. But that doesn't mean I'm kicking you out. I'm not cruel. Her shoulders sagged with relief she tried desperately to hide. But, I continued gently, I need you to understand something. Dad left it to me because he trusted me to protect it. And he trusted me to protect myself. I can't give that up. She nodded slowly, tears gathering again. Her voice cracked, I didn't want to lose everything. When he died, it felt like the ground disappeared. And then you found that deed, and suddenly it felt like I was disappearing too. My chest tightened painfully. Mom, you're not disappearing. But we can't keep pretending I'm the weak one just so you feel strong. Her eyes widened. Because there it was. The thing neither of us had ever said. I continued, I'm emotional, yes. But I'm not fragile. I'm soft, but I'm not breakable. Dad saw that. And maybe it's time you saw it too. Silence filled the room again, different this time. Not broken. Not angry. Healing. After a long moment, she whispered, I'm sorry, Emma. I sucked in a breath. That sentence felt like a miracle. She looked at the deed again with new eyes. Your father trusted you. I should have trusted you too. Tears blurred my vision. Thank you. Michael exhaled shakily. Okay, so we're not fighting. I laughed softly, wiping my cheek. No. We're not fighting. He smiled and pulled us both into a hug, awkward, messy, imperfect, exactly like family. A soft revenge unfolds later that evening. I walked outside with the deed in my hands. My mother watched me from the kitchen window, not with suspicion, not with resentment, but with something I never thought I'd see. Respect. My revenge had never been about winning. It wasn't about taking the house. It wasn't about proving she was wrong. It was about letting the truth land softly, so it could break open the parts that needed light. And somehow, it worked. For the first time in my life, my mother looked at me not as a child she could control, but as a woman my father trusted. And that was enough. The house felt different after that morning. Lighter. As if the truth itself had opened a window somewhere deep inside the walls. My mother moved quietly the rest of the day. Not in avoidance, not in anger. More like someone learning to walk again after years of stiffness. Every now and then I caught her studying me, really studying me. Not with judgment. Not with disappointment. But with a kind of cautious wonder. Maybe it was the first time she'd ever seen me without the filter of her own expectations. Maybe it was the first time I'd ever seen her without the armor she wore for so long. Dad used to say, your mom loves in ways you can't always recognize. I never understood that. Maybe I still didn't. But I was beginning to see parts of it, hidden, clumsy, unfinished. That evening, she knocked softly on my bedroom door. Emma, she said, voice low, can we talk? I opened the door and stepped aside, letting her in. She stood in the middle of my room, her posture tense, like she was bracing for another confrontation, but her eyes told a different story. I made tea, she said, holding 2 mugs. One was my favorite mug, the one Dad bought me when I graduated college. She'd never touched it before. I blinked. Thank you. She set the mugs on my desk and sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing the blanket nervously with her palm. Michael left earlier, she said. He told me I need to rethink the way I speak to you. I sat in the desk chair across from her. Well, he's not wrong. A small, broken smile tugged at her lips. He said you're stronger than I give you credit for. My throat tightened. I am. She nodded, eyes downcast. I know that now. There was a long pause. Then she took a deep breath, the kind people take when they're about to peel back an old scar. I was raised by a mother who didn't know softness. Her voice trembled. She believed emotions were weaknesses. She punished me for crying. She said love was something you earned, not something you received. My chest ached. I had never heard my mother talk like this. Not once in my life. When I married your father, she continued, staring at her hands, he was so gentle. So patient. He opened doors without needing praise. He never raised his voice. He believed kindness was strength. A tear slid down her cheek, surprising her. She wiped it quickly. I didn't know how to match his softness, she whispered. I didn't know how to accept it. So when he gave it to you, so easily, so naturally. I felt like it exposed all the places in me that couldn't give that to him. I inhaled sharply. Mom, she shook her head gently. I was jealous. Not of his love for you, but of your ability to love him back the way he needed. Another tear fell. I saw how he relied on you. How he rested when you were around. He trusted you with his heart. She paused. And I didn't know how to handle that. I let my own tears fall now. I didn't try to swallow them. Mom, he trusted you too, I whispered softly. She laughed once, bitterly. No, Emma. He trusted me to handle the finances, the schedules, the structure, the lists. But his heart, that belonged to you. I shook my head. Love isn't divided like that. But it felt divided, she whispered. And when he made you the owner of the house, it felt like he confirmed every fear I had. The words pressed against the air between us, heavy and fragile all at once. Mom, I said quietly, Dad didn't give me the deed because I was better than you. He did it because he knew I'd protect the house the way he would have wanted. He knew I'd keep it together. He knew I wouldn't let it be sold or lost. She nodded slowly. I know that now. She looked up at me then, eyes red but clear. I'm sorry, she said, voice trembling. For the things I said. For the things I didn't say. For making you feel small because I didn't know how to feel big. My breath hitched. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything. But it was the first apology I'd ever received from her in my entire life. I reached out and took her hand gently. Mom. I don't want to take anything from you. I want us to take care of this together. But I need you to trust me the way Dad trusted me. She squeezed my hand. I'm trying. And in that moment, that was enough. The soft revenge later that night, I walked outside to breathe. The moon was bright, casting silver light across the yard. My mother joined me a few minutes later, standing beside me the way she used to stand beside Dad, slightly angled, not quite knowing how to lean in. She stared up at the sky and whispered, Your father loved this house. I nodded. I do too. We stood in silence, the wind brushing softly against us, carrying the scent of the garden Dad used to tend. I'm glad he left it to you, she whispered suddenly. I turned to her, surprised. She swallowed. Because you see it as more than walls. You see it as him. Tears filled my eyes again. I do. And I think, she paused, voice fragile, I think he knew you would save me from losing myself in the grief. I blinked. Mom, you having the deed, she whispered, saved more than the house. It saved us. My tears finally overflowed. Because this was the revenge I never meant to give, a revenge so soft it healed instead of harmed. My mother didn't need punishment. She didn't need exposure. She didn't need victory thrown in her face. She needed the truth to light the parts of her that had lived in shadow for too long. By giving me the deed, Dad forced her to see me. Not as something to control. Not as something to protect from itself. But as someone capable, strong, and quietly resilient. And for the first time in decades, she finally did. The days that followed felt unreal. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, or because the wounds of years healed overnight, but because, for the first time in my life, my mother and I were finally speaking the same language. Not the language of control. Not the language of fear. Not the language of power. The language of truth. Something shifted between us, something subtle but profound. It was in the way she knocked before entering my room. In the way she paused before responding. In the way she actually listened instead of dismissing. And in the way she let herself be human. My mother had always lived like softness was a dangerous thing. Like feelings were stepping stones that could break beneath her feet. But now, she was learning, slowly, clumsily, that she could walk next to me without bracing for collapse. And I was learning that my softness, my tears, my empathy, my heart, wasn't a weakness she needed to fix. It was a strength she needed to understand. The real conversation a week after the deed confrontation, I found her in the backyard near the rose bushes Dad used to trim. She was holding a small gardening tool but not using it, just staring at the flowers like they were speaking in a language she hadn't learned yet. I walked toward her slowly. Hey. She glanced up. Hey. The air smelled like late spring, fresh soil, warm grass, a little sweetness. She looked back at the roses. Your father used to tell me these flowers were dramatic. A small smile tugged at her lips. He said they bloomed only when they felt like it. I laughed softly. Sounds like him. She nodded. I never understood why he liked them so much. They seemed messy. Unpredictable. High maintenance. I waited. Then she added quietly, but I think I understand now. I tilted my head. Why? She touched one of the petals gently. Because despite being delicate, they still survive storms. They still grow back after being hurt. The words lodged themselves in my chest. She wasn't talking about the roses. She wasn't even talking about Dad. She was talking about me. I swallowed hard. Mom, she turned to me, eyes moist, not from pain, but from realization. You're not fragile, Emma, she said softly. You're resilient. Like him. Like these flowers. She paused. I never understood softness as strength, until now. My eyes blurred instantly. I stepped forward and hugged her, really hugged her. Not the stiff, polite kind we used to exchange, but something real and warm and long overdue. She held on to me, her breath hitching as she whispered, I'm sorry I made you feel small. You didn't make me small, I whispered back. You just didn't know how big I actually was. She let out a shaky laugh. That's fair. We stayed like that for a long time, letting grief and healing settle into a comfortable mix. Letting the air soften the rough edges. Letting the memory of Dad weave us together instead of pull us apart. A different kind of ownership. A few days later, I sat at the dining table with the deed again, not because I needed to defend it, but because I needed to understand it. The house felt like more than walls now. It felt like a bridge between the woman I used to be and the woman I became because of my father. Between the mother I feared and the mother I was learning to see differently. My mother sat across from me, watching me study the paper. You can do whatever you want with it, she said. Keep it. Sell it. Share it. I won't fight you. I shook my head. I don't want to sell it. And I don't want to lock you out of it. She nodded slowly. Then, what do you want? I breathed in deeply. I want us to manage it together, I said softly. Not because you control it. Not because I own it. But because it's the last piece of him we both have. Her eyes softened. You mean that? Yes. The quiet that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Healing. Like a thread sewing old wounds shut. We'll do it together then, she said. And that was the softest revenge of all, not the ownership of the house, but the ownership of my voice. Something she could no longer take from me. Something Dad had given me long before the deed. Letting go without losing. A week later, I walked through the house alone, room by room, touching everything Dad had built. The picture frames. The old rocking chair. The faded rug he refused to replace. The smell of coffee that somehow lingered in the kitchen tile. I whispered, I hope you see this, Dad. Because what he left wasn't property. It was clarity. The kind you gain when the truth finally rises to the surface. When love is no longer confused with control. When softness is recognized as strength. When the child a parent underestimated becomes the adult they finally respect. That night, I placed the deed in a new folder. Not hidden. Not locked away. But somewhere visible, somewhere honest. Because it wasn't just a deed anymore. It was a story. A lesson. A quiet victory. A mother's final gesture. The last thing I expected was what happened the next morning. I walked downstairs to find my mother sitting at the dining table with a notebook open in front of her. It was the same notebook Dad had used to jot down reminders, grocery lists, birthdays, gardening tips. He'd written on the inside cover, if lost, return to family. My mother glanced up as I entered. I was thinking, she said, hesitating. Maybe we should start writing things down together. Finances. Repairs. Plans. Decisions. I blinked. Together? She nodded. Yes. Together. I want to do this the right way. I sat down across from her. Okay. She handed me a pen, Dad's pen. Then let's start, she said. It wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about property. It wasn't about who controlled what. It was about something else entirely. It was about rebuilding what we didn't know how to build before. Soft revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's not about winning or proving your worth like a trophy. It's about letting the truth do the work. Letting love rise where bitterness once lived. Letting someone see the consequences of their choices, not through punishment, but reflection. Soft revenge is the kind that changes hearts instead of breaking them. And it doesn't always end with two people perfectly healed. Sometimes, it ends with two people finally beginning. My mother wasn't suddenly the warmest person in the world. She wasn't suddenly emotional. She didn't transform overnight. But she saw me. And she let me see her. And for the first time in my life, we were on the same side. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you for listening. If you've ever had to find strength in places people assumed you were weak, this story is for you.